by Mike Renner. He's the host of the Pushing the Pile podcast with Kyle Long. I will say, Kyle Long, great friend of the show. You're a great friend of the show. I don't know how much pushing of the pile you've done. I feel like there's a lot of heavy lifting in that name. Maybe Kyle has done a lot of the pushing of the pile and you've done very little.
Yeah, it was mainly centered around Kyle. Like, we'll put out some like promo stuff, and it's literally just Kyle's face. You know, it's not my face that makes the promo stuff.
Yeah.
So we know where our bread's buttered, but it's a good show. Check it out.
Breaking news: Desmond Watson from Florida has weighed in at 464 pounds, which would make him the heaviest NFL player in history.
Usually they say tip the scales. That's more like break the scales.
That's break the scales. That's we needed to send in for a scale we didn't have in the facility. So I don't know how good of a prospect he is, but I would take a flyer on him.
Dude, if he could convince me he could drop like 120 pounds, I would take him in the 5th round. He's so talented. The fact that he can even move at that weight. I think isn't dropping 120 pounds from that weight kind of easy? Nowadays,
Terrence Cody, famously, Terrence Cody was not 460, but at Alabama, Terrence Cody was some like mythical weight.
Yeah,
coming into Alabama, and then by the time he actually got to camp, he had dropped a ridiculous amount of it. He was still massive, but Saban was like, "We're not doing this. We're not doing this high school weight thing," and it took like 2 months for him to drop it. I don't know.
It should theoretically be. I mean, now with Ozempic, which I don't know if the NFL considers PEDs, but like that, like just give him that. You can't stay at that weight.
How many guys there are? Maybe you can count on one hand the amount of NFL players who would ever have needed Ozempic, because most guys need to gain weight.
Damon Harrison back in no, not Damon Harrison. No, who's the Terrence Newman, right?
Terrence
Knighton.
No, Terrence, yeah, I was gonna say Terrence Newman's a cornerback. Terrence Knighton.
Knighton was one who just like end of his career. You're just looking at him. You're like, that's too much. You know?
He is now, I believe, he's now the defensive line coach of Florida State.
Yes. Yeah.
So there you go.
He is.
Wow. All right. So we're doing most underrated and overrated prospects. And the one thing that I want to caution here, because I was doing my list here, I don't out and out want to say anybody's bad, right? Because we're not saying that. We're not saying anybody's great. We're not saying anybody's bad. We're not saying anybody's a bust. If you're looking for a biggest busts, that's a different episode. That's actually a pretty good idea for an episode. Biggest bust potential. But I'm going to tell you something right now.
I think you have to put an ID in to watch that episode nowadays.
Yeah, we would probably workshop the phrasing there.
Yeah.
Workshop the phrasing. But biggest NFL bust draft drop. See, I'm still doing it. I'm not getting any better at the phrasing. Yeah. But we're going to do overrated and underrated relative to where they are right now. I use the consensus big board for this to kind of determine. And if I say, hey, pick 60 is underrated, that doesn't mean he's going to be better than pick 4. It just means he's underrated at pick 60. So I just want to caution that before anybody gets all upset at what we're doing here. You have the floor. Let's start positively.
Okay, great.
Give me your underrated guy, number 1.
All right, number 1, I want to start with this guy. I have 2 real small schoolers that I just think maybe, not enough people have watched, but Charles Grant from William & Mary. He's a guy who, if he had unfortunately, so he's been banged up throughout this pre-draft process. Okay. So he didn't go to the Senior Bowl. Didn't test the combine. I believe didn't test his pro day. If he had those things, I think you would be getting first round buzz on this guy because he's one of the best athletes in this draft class. I watch him on tape at the tackle position and I'm like, the guys who like Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, Armand Membu, he's right up there in terms of just his ability to move on a football field. And tackle at the end of the day is one of the easier positions to scout because it is that. There's not a lot of guys. It's such a high cutoff position in terms of physical capabilities where there's not many guys 6'5", 34-inch arms or 33-plus-inch arms now with Will Campbell, 33-inch arms who can move. And so if you have a guy that has all those things, it's like, now I'm in the ballpark. And then you watch his film and you're like, he knows how to use his hands. He knows how to generate and continue and maintain leverage throughout his blocks. And I look at his career, and I didn't know this until a few weeks back. He didn't even start playing football until junior year. He was a wrestler, which is like anytime you hear a wrestler, an offensive lineman.
Belichick is so upset right now that he can't take this kid in the second round.
It's like a siren should go off. And watching his tape, you see it. Zach Frazier last year was like the big wrestler in that class. The West Virginia offensive lineman went to the Steelers, was awesome as a rookie. It's just wrestling is trench play. And so I watch him in the trenches, and he uses his hands so well. And even when he doesn't have good position, he's so quick to re-leverage. And all those things, you just put all that together, it's like that guy will figure it out, in my opinion. So right now, I'm looking at NFL mock draft database for their consensus board. He's at 95. I think he goes at least 40 places higher than that. And I have him in my top 30 in this year's class. I think if I'm someone like the Eagles, the back end of the first round, I'd be willing to pull the trigger on a guy like that. Because now it's just because of what wins at the tackle position and, the investment that teams like that continue to make, or good forward-thinking franchises continue to make at a position. Like going back to Tytus Howard, who's kind of the last small school offensive tackle that really surprised to go in the first round. I think his tape's better than Tytus Howard. So it wouldn't surprise me if he goes a lot higher than that consensus board ranking right now.
It's interesting about the Eagles, and I've been thinking a lot about the way the Eagles attack, something that Mike Tomlin talked about how most coaches run away from coaching, right? Most coaches say, hey, we're not going to draft this kid because his hand placement isn't good. Well, that's coaching. Okay, that's your job to make him have better hands. We're good on that, right? That's why we get paid so much money. And I've been thinking about the way the Eagles take these projects, and they don't give up on them, and they give them the care they deserve in a era where I think with limited practice time, a lot of teams are just throwing up their hands and going, I don't know, I'm not gonna handle this. Which is something, by the way, that Belichick was able to do really well, where he was stashing guys on IR and saying, hey, let's take a year, taking wrestlers, letting them develop.
Yep. And
I go back to something J-Lux Hunt said on this show, Super Bowl week, which is he said, he didn't beat Lane Johnson until he was so bad going against Lane Johnson in training camp that he apologized to Lane Johnson for a cross chop move because Lane Johnson threw him down the field. Okay. And that by week 13, he beat him. And he, that's development, that's athleticism, but it's also just like, hey, we're going to take this project who's never played a snap of high level college football. Never happened. He was a Houston Christian and he was new to the game. And then they said, Jordan Mailata, same deal. Like they're going to take these guys from small schools with flyers and they're going to develop them. And I think that I'm glad you mentioned the Eagles as a team like this, because a guy like that, small school guy. By the way, you mentioned William & Mary. There's two proud William & Mary alums who helm NFL teams. Do you know who they are?
I do not.
One is Mike Tomlin. The other is Sean McDermott.
Okay.
So,
well, this is the first William & Mary prospect in a while. So
since Sean McDermott, John Stewart went to William & Mary, I think, as well. I don't know why.
There's also a
soccer
terrible NFL player that went to William & Mary. That was Darren Sharper was.
I didn't know that. Oh, boo.
Yeah, so
wow, tough one. Way to bring it down. Way to bring it all down. I was having a great time with Sean McDermott comps. No. I just teams who want to develop, you take small school guys and you work.
And to piggyback off of that, I think with small school guys and like developmental guys specifically, a lot of people they'll draft them and then they'll be forced to play them. I think like Kingsley Suamad-Ea last year in the Chiefs. And I think that's the worst thing you can do. You want those guys because your confidence gets shot. If you're not ready for the NFL and you're a rookie or you step in and it looks awful and you're getting your quarterback sacked, especially on the offensive line, maybe not necessarily defensive line or some other positions where if you lose, it's not like game ending for you, but like you give up a big sack, you give a big sack fumble, it can kind of spiral you mentally in a way that you don't want to subject a guy to. So, you're drafting a guy like Charles Grant, you don't want to throw him out there right away. But that's why drafting these guys before you need them is a big cheat code in the NFL, because they get to then play. And especially when you're investing in the line of scrimmage the way the Eagles do in practice, like J.L. Hunt's going against the best tackle in football, the best tackle duo in football day in, day out. So if you can beat those guys, you can go beat your Jawan Taylors of the world, right? You can go beat other, Joe Tooney if he kicks out to left tackle. So it just generates your confidence the more you have that depth in the trenches.
So I'm looking at Grant here. He started in 2020, so he's in kind of a extra year guy, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know how time works anymore. But did he play tackle the whole? Has he
believe so.
Kicked inside?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So good offensive tackle. Charles Grant, William & Mary. I love this 6'5", 311 according to Wikipedia, from Portsmouth, Virginia. I don't know where that is. I feel like I should know where that is.
I know
I don't know.
nothing. The Virginia, like the Mid-Atlantic, is so foreign to me.
I've done a lot of driving around the Mid-Atlantic. I'm a borderline Mid-Atlantic guy, despite having never lived there. I love that area of the country. All right, I'm gonna go with my first underrated guy, and I'm looking at this guy and I'm confused. So I understand you want to mention the dinged up thing. By the way, I always come back to something that Bill Belichick said about Malcolm Butler, which is that he was such a small school guy at West Alabama, I want to say. His school had just incorrect testing data on him, which is why he didn't get any looks from scouts. But then the
Oh, wow.
Patriots kept being thorough. And then we're like, this guy's better than whatever the data we got was. He actually told Coach K this in an interview right after the Super Bowl. I tried to report the story, and Malcolm Butler was like, I don't want to talk. Like, it's a tough look for the college, right? Like, so
Yes.
whatever. But I remember that vividly. So you always have to cross check everything.
It was like he had a 4.59 was like it was like a really bad time or something, like a 4.61. And I remember I'm like watching him, I was like, this guy's a 4.61. Okay.
Yeah, well, you and Belichick were dialed in. Belichick, by the way, also kind of a Mid-Atlantic guy there with Maryland, and North then Carolina. now he's in North Carolina. Yeah. He probably knows where Portsmouth, Virginia is. All right, so this guy's only done one testing thing, and it's the vertical jump. And for linebackers, he's the best. It's Carson Schwesinger, a former walk-on at UCLA. Now, I watched an interview with him the other day. So first of all, as I said, best vertical jump. He's been dinged up. He has a hip injury. We'll see what happens if he's able to test more in private workouts or whatever. But he hasn't been able to do much. But he's able to do the vertical jump. I saw an interview the other day where he talked about the guys he models his game after. We're talking about Matt Milano. We're talking about Fred Warner. We're talking about Roquan Smith. And the former walk-on thing to me always gives me pause because, frankly, when I look at a non-quarterback, I just worry about athleticism. I always say, well, is he a try-hard? Is he on the team because he has great instinct? But that's not going to go. He's not going to meet the height, weight, speed standards necessary for the NFL. Like, it's very, very, very rare for an unbelievable athlete to not get a college scholarship anywhere, especially a place like UCLA, which is not. We're not talking about Georgia here, right? Proud Big Ten team, I know. But if you can do the best vertical jump at the combine and you're 242 pounds, whatever it is, you've crossed that bridge for me. And I bet on athleticism. Linebacker to me, especially and I watch some of his tape. He's deflecting passes. He's patrolling the middle of the field in a way. One thing about Matt Milano, who, by the way, was also an undervalued prospect, is that like he is so vital to the modern game. Fred Warner too, because of what he's able to do over the middle of the field. The speed, the way he's able to operate in space. It feels to me, and I don't watch as much tape as you guys do, but it feels to me like a day two guy who has the capability to do that. And again, maybe the doctors will check out the hips are always scary or whatever, but a day two guy who has that capability, I'm running to the podium with the card.
Yes, I'm right there with you on Schwesinger. I don't know where he's at on the consensus board, but his tape is, he might 50s, end up as my 60s. Linebacker too. I don't think there's a great, after Jihad Campbell, another like guy I'd even touch in the first rounder. And with Schwesinger, it's like 1 year starter is probably the biggest knock on him. He just hasn't played a ton of football. But when you watch his tape and you're like, the fact that he hasn't played a ton of football is almost like a selling point. You're like, you're telling me this guy's going to get better? You're telling me that there's like another step here because of the way he plays. And the other thing that was interesting to me is you mentioned the vertical jump, but he was listed at, I want to say 225 at UCLA, and he did that vertical at 240, which I've done vertical jump training in the past. I used to be obsessed with dunking in like high school. And the one thing that I know.
Can you dunk?
I used to be able to windmill dunk. I'm 34 years old now and my knees are toast, but I used to be able to. The one thing that every person in that family will tell you is the lighter you are, the better you can fly. Like when you have no body fat, when you are lighter, it is easier to jump. And so the fact that he's doing that at 240 and probably still ascending in terms of like into his body, and that's probably why he didn't get any offers out of high school, is that just probably was underdeveloped physically. That's an intriguing prospect. That's a guy I'm going to want in building. So I'm right there with you.
So he is 52nd on the consensus big board, which seems I think I would go higher on that. I would go higher. Milano, 163rd pick, extremely undervalued. Fred Warner, obviously, I believe a 3rd-round pick, extremely undervalued. These guys get undervalued a lot of times because he's not going to fit every defense. You don't necessarily need not every team needs one. It's not like an edge rusher or a cornerback where you just will take one even if you have 6 of them. Like it's a different type of role.
It's much more of I remember when Bobby Slowick joined our staff at PFF, coming from from Washington at the time. He was the linebackers coach there. And I was like, why were you guys still starting London Fletcher at the end of his career? Like, the guy couldn't move, couldn't run. He's like, getting the calls in and getting everyone lined up is more important than a guy that makes plays at that position. And so that's why a linebacker, you'll have some guys out there who sometimes you're like, why is this guy playing? Well, that could be
all the time.
Yep.
All the time. That was, have you ever heard Andy Benoit's story about Sean Lee?
No, I have not.
So this was written in Sports Illustrated a few years ago, where he's watching tape with the Cowboys defensive coordinator or something. Maybe it was like Rob Marinelli. I don't know. And there was a bust. And immediately the DC was like, all right, it's on this linebacker. And like before it even got out of his mouth. And Andy was like, how do can you take me through the process of how you know? And he goes, because Sean Lee's never made a mistake. And it's like, those are the guys where you want them on your team all the time. And it doesn't matter. Sean Lee was hurt, obviously, but if he was healthy, he could have played till he was 56, just getting everybody lined up. I remember
he was always hurt.
Mental errors get you out of the league quicker than anything because coaches hate it. Coaches hate that kind of uncertainty. You can be slow. You can be, you can be drunk. Doesn't matter. Just run the plays the way they're supposed to be run.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. Don't be drunk. I mean, the drunkenness would probably lead to not running the plays.
It's definitely not going to help you. I don't think that's a performance enhancer the way, we usually talk about. But some guys probably have
The one thing I'll say, I was surprised to learn recently from a player how hungover everybody is at walkthroughs that don't require physical practice. Like if there's a Saturday walkthrough or something after a Friday night, there's a lot of alcohol in the breaths.
I'm sure though now compared to I can't imagine what the 80s and 90s were like for that.
Well, it's like Saturday Night Live, right? It's like what they say about Saturday Night Live, where it's like all of the new cast members hear about like everybody was on drugs in the 70s and 80s, and they're like, okay, it's probably going to be a den of sin, and then it's just everybody is going to boxercise classes,
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay, it's different now.
It's changed too much. There's too much. There's too much information. Like you go to a bar the night before, someone videotapes that you're out there. Like,
do you end up like Jermaine Burton?
You end up
Jermaine Burton?
Yeah. If you're at a casino the night before at 4 a.m., someone puts you on blast. It's like, come on, you're telling me Brett Favre wasn't at Oneida Casino in Green Bay the night before games sometimes till 4 a.m. Had to be.
Yeah, maybe. Oneida. I've never been in Oneida Casino. Should I go in?
It's not great.
No, okay. Some of those casinos that are not, MGM, you know what I'm saying? Like some of those casinos can get bleak really quickly.
It's the average age is probably been collecting Social Security for a decade.
Yeah. So, and they've always got like weird artifacts from like the American West. You're just like, what? Like, they always have like Bonnie and Clyde's car, and you're like, okay, whatever, man. I'm trying to get a Bud Light. All right, let's get negative. Give me your number one overrated prospect right now.
This one. So just compared to where on the consensus board and then where I have them, probably the biggest difference, and it's Jalen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback. Right now, he's top 50 on the consensus board.
Oh, my goodness.
That, to me, I just don't see it. The comparison to Jalen Hurts has been made. And Jalen Hurts, I could see a path to success. He was accurate at the collegiate level. He's, operated from the pocket, at least from like a pocket presence perspective, the way it needed to be in the NFL. So there were some real easily translatable things to his game. I watch Milroe, and I think the only thing I see that's NFL translatable is one, his arm strength, and two, his legs. And even the legs aspect, it's not as if he's Jaden Daniels or Lamar Jackson from like an elusiveness standpoint, making guys miss. He's more of a runner like a Justin Fields, where if you give him a crease, it could be dangerous, but he's not operating like a run concept the way a running back would. He doesn't have that sort of vision. He doesn't have that sort of element to his game where it's really that dynamite that you can hang your hat on it consistently. And so, the comparison has been made as like he's raw and Anthony Richardson was raw. Richardson goes top 5. Milroe, why doesn't he go that high? I don't see that ability from the pocket whatsoever. I just do think that they had to put so many guardrails in that Alabama offense to play to his strengths, basically eliminating any quick underneath intermediate concepts and just relying on what he can do with his deep ball. It's like, yeah, it was good, but also the deep ball that he was thrown to was like Isaiah Bond and Jermaine Burton last year, Ryan Williams this year. The talent was insane that he was thrown to, and it's not going to be like that at the NFL level. So I love the athlete. I think if he wanted to switch positions, he very well could. I just think at quarterback, I don't see the upside. And especially when he checks in with sub 9-inch hands, which is kind of, when you're inaccurate and you have small hands, I don't see you ever getting more accurate. That's a big limiter because you see it with the start. Like he floats a lot of balls, a lot of non-spirals, just because it's hard to grip the football effectively in NFL football with 8 3/4 inch hands.
2 things. Number one, you mentioned Anthony Richardson comp. That's bad now. That's bad. It's bad to be like, well, Anthony Richardson, okay.
Exactly.
The other thing is Anthony Richardson was the most athletic quarterback in the history of the combine, which Jalen Milroe did not reach those highs. So even the tantalizing, what if, and also I think the lesson of Anthony Richardson is if you're going to draft a guy like that, you need to give him a long runway and a lot of reps and a lot of football. And the Colts immediately hit the ejector button as soon as they could. They're cowards. They're football cowards.
Well, I mean, they're going to give him a year 3 though. They aren't moving up.
I mean, they're going to start Daniel Jones.
You think so? I mean,
without a doubt. You don't sign Daniel Jones, who's just the height of mediocrity, unless Joe Flacco was bad last year.
Yes.
Okay. There was this idea that Joe Flacco steadied the ship. He did not steady the ship. There was no steadying of the ship.
Yeah. Ship was off.
So it was not good. There's a Paul DePodesta line and whether or not he's a great football mind is, a separate matter, right? He's been running the Browns for a while. He was at a baseball conference years ago, and they said, what makes a good owner? And he said, I don't know what makes a good owner, but I know what makes a bad owner. What makes a bad owner is acting like my children at an amusement park, where they say, I want to go on this ride, I want to go on this ride, I want to go on this ride. And they beg you all day to go on this ride. And then they get on it, and it's got this steep-ass drop, and they start screaming, and they say, I want to get off. And he was talking about analytics and how, this owner says he wants analytics. Oh, no, we're doing something really unpopular with the fan base. Get me off. No, I don't like analytics anymore. That's a bad owner. I would say the same is true for coaching a prospect like Anthony Richardson. You can't take him and then go, our jobs might be on the line. We have to ruin his career. You can't do that. You have to say, we took this guy knowing the risks, and we will live with the risks, and we will stick with it, and we will try to we cannot pull the plug after how many games did he start before? I mean, he got the 4 in 2023, and then he asked
so
out
probably
6.
11 or 12.
Yeah, something like that. And then you're like, well, that's it for that. See you later. What was the point of taking him? You were hoping that a raw prospect immediately developed? That's your job, buddy.
And I think we've seen, him, Trey Lance, just don't have the time.
You don't have the time. Nobody gives it. There's no reps anymore.
Yeah.
So don't take these guys. If you're not going to give them the reps, this isn't 1982 when, as you mentioned, everybody's hungover and we're doing everybody unlimited practice time to get out the sweats from whatever they were doing that before. This ain't that. This is limited practice time. They don't get 15 padded practices during the season. And all of a sudden we're going to develop. And then all of a sudden you got these bridge quarterbacks who are taking young quarterbacks reps in training camp. Get that out of here. Get that out of here. You got to give these guys first team reps immediately.
That's one of my biggest pet peeves is signing the known 40th best quarterback in the NFL and like splitting and acting as if that's like competition. Like a guy who everyone knows you don't want starting for your team, and then just like giving him reps and game time above a guy who's maybe in his first or second year. It's like, dude, just let the guy have some time. And that's obviously like, if Indy starts Daniel Jones this year.
The only function I'll say is there are some quarterbacks like Ryan Fitzpatrick. There's somebody recently I was thinking about. Russell Wilson is another one. If you can't beat them out, you're not the guy. But I don't even think Joe Flacco beat out Anthony Richardson. I think they just didn't want Anthony Richardson to play anymore.
Yeah, they just want to send a message.
Yeah. All right. Overrated. Let's do underrated number 2.
Okay. I have a couple guys. So I have a defensive lineman or a running back. Which one would you rather?
Just say both quickly. I don't care.
Okay.
The podcasts are finite, dude. Infinite. Excuse me.
I went with David Walker from Central Arkansas. Like I said, I had two small school guys.
I don't even know where the hell Central Arkansas is. I don't know I don't know anything about Arkansas geographically, but I love this.
I'm right there with you. I don't think I've actually ever been to Arkansas. I think I've been to like every state.
I drove through it.
Never in Arkansas. But I imagine it's dead center of it, given the name and given his tape.
It might be like a USF situation. USF, where it's like, crucially, in West Central Florida. Nothing to do with the South unless you're in Pensacola.
True. Okay, so Central Arkansas, David Walker, he is 6 foot, 263 defensive end. And his tape this past year is maybe the most dominant tape I've seen in my decade of doing this NFL scouting. Now, again, level of competition, not great, but he just was a man among boys. He is so powerful, and his combine testing at that size was darn near identical to Brandon Graham. So that's been the comp for him all along. 40-yard dash, vertical jump, 3-cone, like all within a tenth of a second, an inch of Brandon Graham. And that's the body type. The guy that's just no one wants to block, no one can block because he's so low to the ground. You just can't get leverage on this guy. And he just bull rushed everyone. His PFF grade this past year actually broke the PFF record for defensive ends, better than Aiden Hutchinson's, who had it previous to that. And so just watching his tape and then watching the Senior Bowl, where, again, anytime he bull rushed, every single bull rush was just running off its back. 345-pound Anthony Belton at left tackle from NC State had him just doing the moonwalk into the quarterback. He really is a unique edge rusher that maybe he's not necessarily a starter. Him playing the run at that size is going to be difficult to like get off blocks consistently. But that guy's going to rush the passer, and he's 130 on the consensus board. I have him as a top 50 player just because you tell me I can get a plus pass rusher at somewhere in the second round, you take it every day. So he's my most.
Wow. Give me the running back quickly.
Jordan James, Morgan. I haven't seen him in a lot of top hundreds. Obviously, crowded running back class, but he has the best vision in this running back class. He has a style of running that's very conducive to making its way to the NFL. The sort of his decisiveness and processing, I kind of liken it to the quarterback position at running back, where like the holes get smaller once you get to the NFL. The decisions have to be made faster, and he makes those with such precision and such speed that you just know he's going to be able to run behind an NFL offensive line. So those are my two.
I didn't give my overrated, and I need to do it right now. I shouted this guy out a little bit a couple times when his testing first came in. And then I started to look deeper, and I didn't like it as much. And now I'm just going to call him completely overrated. It's Mr. Shemar Stewart, who at one point, like Booger McFarland said after his testing, he should be in the conversation for a number 1 overall pick. And then people were talking about top 10, and people were talking about middle of the first round. The consensus board is lower on him. Evals are all over the place. The athleticism is through the roof. But here's my concern. Number 1, he doesn't, as we know, this is not breaking news, he doesn't finish sacks. Not a lot of production. Tons of pressure. I've seen people say that he just is not that, not to be what the people Mike Tomlin goes at, but like he does not have a developed upper body. I don't even know what you would call it. Like he's just not very savvy with his upper body. He doesn't close well. Yes, it's not even about moves. It's about how he operates with his upper body. It's just not there. So he's able to get the pressure. He's not able to get the closing speed, the sacks, all that stuff. The other problem is this is via Fran Duffy. So I had talked with Solak a couple weeks ago about how everyone's talking about Trayvon Walker, And Trayvon Walker was a much better run defender, and he played more violently. Like the pads, like it was just sounded better, it looked better, it was violent. Shemar isn't violent. To that end, Fran Duffy says that he has Shemar Stewart has 21 career run stops on 575 run defense snaps. That's a run stop rate of just 3.7%. 204 edges in the last decade, Mike Renner, have been charted on this. Of those 204, one was worse against the run than Shemar Stewart. One.
Whew. No, the stat was he was outside the top 200 nationally in solo tackles among only defensive ends this year. Wasn't even a top 200 defensive end in terms of tackles, in terms of just like getting a guy on the ground, which doesn't seem possible when you're that athletic.
To quote the great Bill Parcells, and I understand athleticism translates. I get it. I no one bets bigger on athleticism than I do. But to quote Bill Parcells about this particular issue, if he doesn't bite as a puppy, he's not going to bite as a dog.
Love that quote. And I'm right there with you. He wasn't in when I put out my initial top 50 of just like watching the guy's tape. I watched it and I'm like, I would be scared as heck to draft this guy. Now he cracked into my top 50 after his athletic testing. He is a freak, and you do see that on tape. And edge is the one position where we've seen guys who are in that mold develop. Rashawn Gary comes to mind as one guy who didn't make the impact on the collegiate football field, did in the NFL. But even with Sean Gary, there's stuff that like still leaves you wanting a lot more. And I think watching Stewart's tape compared to Gary's tape in college, there's like so much that leaves me wanting more with him, that it's so far to go that I think you could be sitting there 4 years down the line, and maybe the light switch will flip on and he will figure out a couple moves effectively and turn into an impact player. But you could be sitting there 4 or 5 years down the line being like, when's it going to happen? And still hoping, just because you probably are never going to give up on an athlete like that, but he might just be a non-factor for a few years in the NFL.
There's a difference between taking a flyer on athleticism and taking him 9th overall.
Correct.
That's my take.
That's
all right. You have a more overrated?
One more overrated. I am going to go with another running back in this class. I'm going to go with Kaleb Johnson out of Iowa. I've seen
I kind of like him.
Okay, I've seen him in some first round mocks. Not anymore. I think after the combine,
that's too much.
4.57. That's too much. 66 now overall. I don't have him in my top 100, and some of that's just it's crowding running back class. There's a lot of good ones, but I watch his tape and I think he's just fine. I think he is a fine running back prospect. I don't think I ever see special traits. His vision is just okay. His explosiveness, long speed, 4.57. I think he plays a little bit faster than that, but it's not like really selling me on him. And while I think he can run outside zone well, I don't trust his vision in like other concepts. I think he stops his feet far too often. And I just don't see the wiggle to make guys miss in the hole consistently. So in a crowd running back class, I actually don't even have him in my top 10 running back. So again, I think he can get some carries for you. I don't see him as a bell cow that he's been billed as, that you would, if you're taking guy 66 overall, you're hoping he's your lead dog for a while.
Wow. I think he runs hard. I think he can fit in outside zone stuff. I would take a flyer on him. I probably would have to do my rankings of top running backs, but I think I have him higher than you do. A true overrated person to bring, because I've
not a lot of people. Yeah,
maybe I'm overrating him. Quickly, my underrated. I really, we're talking about Shemar Stewart here. I really like Landon Jackson, like really, and I think that's looking at the consensus big board here. He is outside the first round. If you're looking at, so first of all, at his pro day, according to Relative Athletic Score, he was the 10th most athletic defensive end of all time at a position where that matters. And 6'6", 264, better production than Shemar Stewart. His best comps with his testing are Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, and Marcus Davenport, all of whom have a high floor, and in some cases are going to go to Canton. One case is going to go to Canton. I think he is maybe if you're looking to take that flyer on an athletic defensive end, I'd maybe go Landon Jackson over Shemar Stewart.
Oh, so Jackson's very interesting because if you watch Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell in the SEC this past year, their worst reps come against him. He had the reps where you're like, oh, that looked ugly for Banks and that looked ugly for Campbell. They didn't have a ton this past year, but they came against Landon Jackson. So his high-end capability shows up on tape. And the interesting thing about him is I think everyone was talking about this after the combine, the bag drill from high school. You've seen that video of him doing it and it looks like atrocious. And then by the end of his collegiate career, like every single year, he's added like another piece to his game. And so was really behind the eight ball, obviously coming into college. It's where redshirt wasn't really an impact player as a redshirt freshman, goes through to his redshirt junior year this past year and like has blossomed every single year. So I think I have him right about where consensus is, which I think, right around 50, I think he's like a mid-second. But if you were higher on him, I'm not going to argue because I do think there's more flashes there than there are flashes from Shemar Stewart. And there's more in terms of progression there than I've seen from Shemar Stewart.
The last thing I want to do, I'm going to let you go. You have to do CBS, like a fancy network guy. I have two overrated guys who I think are good, but they've become too overrated to me. Number one, and I hate doing this because I love him. He's been on this show. Guys, we can't be doing Ashton Jeanty at 4. We can't be doing it. We can't be doing it. And I've heard so many mocks where in the last week where people were saying, well, Vrabel wants his Derrick Henry. Well, Henry wasn't 4th overall. And I don't want to get into the running back value thing. I don't want to do it. But that roster has such a long way to go that prime Derrick Henry, I don't know how much he's going to help because that roster, the line needs help. Stephon Diggs was actually a very good signing. The defense, you just need talent. You should start stacking talent. I don't know if Ashton Jeanty raises that floor enough to be in games. I just think that it would be really hard for a team like the Patriots or any of these teams that have a long way to go. Ashton Jeanty, to me, like a Saquon Barkley, can help win a team a Super Bowl. But the operative phrase is win the Super Bowl, not get from 4 wins to 9 wins, which is what the most teams picking in the top 10 need to do.
I'm trying to think just off the top of my head, who was the last top 5 running back where it was like you look back and you're like, okay, he was worth it. That made sense
top
to draft
5.
him in the top 5.
I think the Falcons are probably happy they have Bijan Robinson. He was 8, yeah. But then we're looking at the 2023 draft. Jalen Carter went with the next pick. Would you rather have Jalen Carter or Bijan Robinson?
That's like more what I'm saying, where it's like where that guy was undisputed, like where the next few picks or whatever, your other options, the running back was definitely the best one. I think every single time, whether it's Saquon, whether it's Darren McFadden, whether it's Trent Richardson, right? Every single time you look back and you're like, oh, ill. It's just like it does not age well. And no offense to Jeanty, I think he's awesome. I think he's undisputedly RB1, and I still would take him in the first round. It's just
I agree.
Levels. There's levels. And the levels are very important at the top of the draft. That's why people give up all these picks to go and try to get into the top of the draft. So it's very important not to utilize those picks or to hit triples and home runs with those top 5 picks instead of singles and doubles.
I just have to say this. Again, this is somebody I had a crush on earlier in this draft process. Nick Emmanwori has now risen too far up draft boards. The tape doesn't line up with the measurables yet. You can see, it just feels like he's flat-footed too many times. He doesn't play as athletic as he shows. I've been burned before by really athletic safeties who haven't translated to the NFL level. When it first happened, and these testing numbers came through, I go, oh, someone's going to get a steal. And now I'm seeing all of these big board stuff that's like, I'm going to, hold on one second. I'm going to find out
he's 25.
So yeah. He's 24th in the consensus big board. And then the prediction by consensus big board is 19th to Tampa Bay. That is too rich for my blood. So again, that's why I did this preface. I'm not saying he's bad. I would want him on my team, but I'd rather have more complete prospects on my team in the first round. Bill Belichick, again, I'm going to quote him again. He had this rule that was basically like, no flags, no red flags in the first round, couple red flags in the second round. It's like, all right, we'll make one exception in the second round for height, weight, speed, or character. In the third round, we'll make one more exception. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a sliding scale. First round, to me, it's always got to be clean. I've always got to see it on tape and with the measurables.
Yeah, and I think I've had this take for a while about like high-end athletes, in that a lot of people get enamored when a guy's like the tippy top, right? Like the Shemar Stewart, like Nick Emmanwori, when you have this, like, the 10 RAS score, or just like this elite athlete. But I don't think there's a big functional difference on a football field between that and the guy who's just like a very, very good athlete in terms of where your ceiling can be at the NFL level. A lot of ceiling is between the ears and already should show on a football field about where your ceiling can push. A lot of elite players at the NFL level, pretty much the vast majority of them, played good football, and it showed that athleticism showed in college. You didn't have to wait until the combine to get confirmation that this guy was a freak athlete, right? For most guys who at the NFL look like freak athletes. So I'm always wary of the guy who you're like, just wait until like his combine testing is better than what you see on the football field, because why is it? It shouldn't be. You should look more athletic on a football field than you do in shorts in India. Thank
you, buddy. I went over my allotted time, but we have 45 minutes to get to CBS. My apologies to.
It's actually a remote show today. They changed it on me, so I'm going to be sitting.
So you're just sitting here. You're just going to be sitting. You have 45 minutes to twiddle your thumbs. My apologies to. I don't even know who runs CBS anymore. I was going to say Les Moonves, but I think he got fired years ago.
I'm not sure too, because we're like merging. I think right now it's still like up, but we're about to be Skydance. So
beautiful. I hope they're watching. I hope you're watching Skydance. I know one guy at Skydance. All right, see you, buddy.
See you, Kevin.